Exactly 4 minutes past the hour, which is 9 a.m. Thank you so much for being with us on UBC TV. Welcome to The Extra, which is an extension of Good Morning Uganda. But just a quick reminder, we are always here from 6:30 till 9, then an extension of 10, where we make sure you're updated with what is happening locally, but also globally with me, Robert Chirabonyonyitono, and the entire team, making it the mighty four that wake you up, spice up your mornings, brighten your mornings, so you can't afford to miss this program. Make it a date with us every day of the week from 6:30, so that we energize, we set the agenda, we set the pace, we show you light at the end of the tunnel. So there you're able to fit in any meaningful discussion, but also knowledgeable of what is going to be happening globally and internationally. Now, today, in The Extra, we are going to be discussing something very important. We all live, and at one time, we'll go back and meet our Creator. But more so, the people we leave behind, our loved ones, find it very hard when it comes to how to go about life when we are gone with what you have left behind. That's why you find a man had a lot of property, but in just 2-3 years, it's all gone. The children have been quarreling, fighting each other, sometimes even death. The widows had challenges, or the widows have had challenges in Africa, because yes, we even have a full president now who has 2 first ladies. So that happens. More than one wife, then that is trouble. Now, today we want to understand, when we talk about letters of administration, how does one get them? Why are they very important, and how do you get them? Well, I'm not alone to discuss this. I'm with a lawyer, that is Terry Kahuma. I hope I pronounced that name very right. Usually it disturbs me. Kahuma. Welcome to the studios, and thank you so much for finding time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chirabo. It's always a pleasure to come back to UBC and be here with you to break down and demystify these complex legal aspects. Well, they're not really complex, but to explain them more to the general public.
Now, I'll begin with, when we talk about letters of administration.
Yes.
Let's understand, what are these?
Letters of administration, in simple terms, is a document which is granted to a particular person by a competent court to allow that person to be able to administer the estate or property of a deceased person, especially recently deceased person, as the deceased person would have governed his or her estate. So in other words, letters of administration is, let's say in simple terms, they grant you this document, you apply for it in a competent court, could be a magistrate's court or a high court, and they are allowing you, the administrator of the estate who has been appointed by the family, to be able to govern the estate of the deceased person. In most cases, letters of administration are given to, are put in circumstances where the deceased person did not leave a will behind. Now that will take me to the background of how those start, so I'll reverse engineer. So in terms of family law and family aspects all over, like you had said, a man works for so long, a woman works for so long, she works tirelessly, she retires, she amassed all this wealth and assets, and she dies. Now there's what we call testate succession and intestate succession. Succession is basically, I think it's self-explanatory. It's to pass on your estate or whatever you have amassed in this world to the next generation. So basically it's that in tested succession, we have what's called a will. I think we've all heard of what a will is.
Definitely, yes.
Now, that one, I may not dwell so much into it, but once there's a will, this person was very self-aware of the laws in Uganda. In most cases was a land person, or had heard of other people executing wills. So they come up with a will, they say, I have this plot of land in Ntinda, I have Kololo, I have even some property elsewhere, abroad, I have a multi-billion-dollar company. So I'm writing everything down in my will, I'm going to get my lawyer. And he already appoints what's called an executor of the will. and other witnesses to that will.
Now, what's the role of this executor? Because if I've left everything well documented, why do I need an executor?
The executors...
So that's just a clan leader to come and read and say, well, this is the will that this is left behind.
No, it may not necessarily work like that. A clan leader may not be necessary in this particular aspect. The executor's role is to make sure that the will is implemented the way the deceased person had intended it to be. So even when you look at the word executor, it's to put into action what the deceased would have wanted. Yes. So that is what we call tested succession, meaning that this person died while he left a will behind. So everything was in place. So there are no these things of the children begin fighting, their own mother, the stepmother, those things. Now, in tested succession is where I've amassed my billion-dollar company. I have farmlands everywhere all over Uganda. I have land. I have a multi-billion-dollar estate. And I did not leave a will behind. Let's say I died while getting a stroke or a heart attack. Anything could happen.
An accident.
An accident.
Yes.
So, if I died without leaving a will behind, that is what's called intestate succession. Now, that is where letters of administration come in. Now, I think from reverse engineering, I've now come back to where we started from. Now, the steps under which one can be able to get letters of administration is that, firstly, they need to understand what are they, what kind of situation are we in. Our father died without leaving a will behind, or the head of the family died without leaving a will behind. Okay, now that we have heard of what are called letters of administration, let us now apply for them. But before we even apply for them, we need to first sit down as a family. That is the first step. The family, the clan, the beneficiaries of the deceased, the people who were in his close family, his or her close family, need to sit down and appoint someone who is going to be granted those letters of administration. So if let's say I'm the head of my family and I left 7 children, 10 grandchildren, and I died without leaving my will behind. Now, amongst all of those, let's say I even took care of my late brother's children like that, I have a big clan or family. They are going to sit down and appoint someone who is going to be able to take on that responsibility of being the administrator of my estate. I think now you're following me. Yes. So upon being appointed as an administrator of that estate, then I'm going to now apply for what are called a letter of, or a certificate of no objection. Yes. Now, that certificate of no objection, it basically means that I'm applying to the Administrator General's office to ask him to grant me that certificate of no objection, because that is one of the biggest requirements to get letters of administration. Certificate of no objection means that no one is objecting to me being granted these letters of administration. I have been appointed, I've followed the due process, I'm now starting out that whole process, so I don't have any criminal record. The family has been able to sit down and appoint me as a administrator of that estate, and then I'm applying to the Administrator General's office, because the Administrator General is the one who ultimately has a very influential say in whether I get letters of administration or not. Yes.
So now a family seat appoints me as an administrator. So as you're applying for these letters, do you have to have minutes, or do you just write? You know, because you may write, I may write. So what is the procedure for that appointed administrator? Because I've seen many families where you hear the administrator is the heir. Either the first son of that family. You know, in Africa, most of the times that's what happens. The first boy child takes over, or the last born son takes over, or a sister, whoever they chose as a heir takes over as the administrator. So now, how do I get this letter of no objection? I personally am the one to write. What documents back up this?
Yes, you're right about there, of course, being some minutes, because, of course, in a very important meeting such as that, we're definitely going to have minutes that were recorded. We're going to have, in those minutes, we're going to state that, okay, the family sat on Saturday, the 13th of August. We had a meeting for about 3 hours, and the entire family sat down and we agreed that we are going to appoint so-and-so, Mr. Chirabo, as the administrator of the estate. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be a child of the deceased. You can be, especially people who are appointed administrators are people who they believe are neutral, mature enough, and can govern the estate the way this person would have done it. So meaning that they do not, ordinarily they do not have to have any sort of like overly sentimental attachment or any bias of any sort. So an administrator can even be the brother of the deceased, the sister of the deceased. Yes, it could also be a child of the deceased. It may not necessarily be...
Or a trusted friend.
Yeah, perhaps.
Now,
Yes.
you've written and you've gotten letter, so a letter of no objection.
Yes.
Now, at that level, what next?
Now, upon getting the certificate of no objection, then you're able to prepare a number of documents that you will need. Still, it's not yet done. We're still in the preliminary stages. There are certain documents that you need to attach, because now, once you've been appointed as the administrator of the estate and gotten the certificate of no objection, then you have to prepare a number of documents. But these ones are quite easy, and these ones will be used as attachments to a further petition. So you later be petitioning to the family court to be able to get these letters of administration. Now, these documents that you need are identification documents. They're identifying you as the administrator. Who are you? Where do you come from? Are you Uganda? And those things. Then you also need to get a list of what are called the entire estate, which are the assets and liabilities of the deceased. So basically, you're stating down in your petition, you're stating down that the deceased had properties all over Uganda, Kabale, Soroti, where he worked. He has his bank accounts here in housing finance, where you list everything. That's what's called identification of documents. You're putting down every single thing that was enlisted in what this person achieved in their lifetime. Yes. So then you also need to list down the beneficiaries of that person. So beneficiaries mean that, the example that I gave, that if I have 7 children and 10 grandchildren, but let's say along the way my late brother died, I took over his family. My late sister died, I took over her family. All those are beneficiaries, because before I died, they were all benefiting from me. Let's say even my parents left me as the head of the home, so I'm also governing what they also amassed in this life. So in the identification of all those documents, all that needs to be listed there, and all the people who are benefiting from me also need to be listed there. Yes. Now, upon that, any person who is applying for those letters of administration, the appointed administrator, needs to now be able to get a lawyer of his or her choice, and then now start to file the petition. They prepare the petition. I think we all know what a petition is. But a petition is basically you are moving the family court, whether it's the magistrate's court or the high court, that's the family division. You're moving them to grant you letters of administration. For those of you who might not know, whenever it comes to family-related issues, in most cases, a petition is what is put into place, or a petition is what is filed. But when it comes to other courts, like criminal court, civil division, then that's what's called a plaint. Yeah, a plaint. But now in this case, we call it a petition. So you're now putting a petition to be granted letters of administration. In that petition, you're going to include an affidavit. You're also going to include the identification of the documents you've put, the list of them, the certificate of no objection, the minutes that you are appointed the administrator of the estate. You put everything in your file, and you put it in court. Now, after that, you count 14 days. you count a 14-day period after you have filed your petition. It has been stamped and everything. That 14-day period is supposed to be a period of a notice that they put it in the newspapers, that newspapers or gazette, anywhere which is a public form of medium or information, that we are, Terry Kahuma is asking for letters of administration. Is there anyone who is objecting to it? So that is, in a way, a final objection. They're giving a final chance to anyone who wants to ask. Terry Kahuma is asking for letters of administration. Is there anyone who can object to it? Does he have some sort of criminal record? Does he have this? Did he forge the minutes of the meeting that he had with his family? So after that, if the 14-day period, if there's no objection, they now call the appointed administrator who is asking for these letters for final identification in court. Then eventually, if it still is no objection and the court or the judge or magistrate deems it fit to grant you the letters of administration, then they grant them to you.
Now, it seems quite a long process.
Yes.
The question is that appointed administrator in today's Uganda, why do they stand to benefit? Let me be an African enough. You know, Terry, we've been friends for some time.
Yes.
Your person, your children find it befitting that that's good friend, Uncle Bob has always been here, you know.
Their childhood friends.
Yeah, he's a neutral person to take over here. Now, why do I stand to benefit? To go through this court petition, my name's appearing in the Gazette, my name in the Vision or whatever paper, you know? Is there anything for the administrator?
Well, they may not necessarily be anything for them. It's to me, it's more of a service, or according to the eyes of the law, it's more of a service. You're trying to do a service for the late person, for the deceased, especially the fact that you are in their life at a certain point. So an administrator may do this, but may not be expectant to benefit anything. They may do it even without, actually, majority of the cases or people that I have met who have family-related issues, as we all know in Uganda, they're the most common. It's family mixed with land. The administrator in most cases does not stand much to benefit. Unless along the way, the family also decides to also give that person something, maybe for the job well done. But in most cases, it's service above self. It's you're doing a certain service for the deceased person. Yes, so they may not stand to benefit. It's a 50-50. Yes.
Well, 50-50. Now, let's also understand this administrator better. Many times you've brought in the element of land that have interacted with issues. You hear the administrator sold our property. The administrator, this land I bought from the administrator of the estate. Where do the powers of this administrator start? And where, if we can, do they end? If me being an administrator, I'll use your name. I'm not saying you're about to die. Me being an administrator of your estate, does it give me power? Do I become the owner? Because you've seen these orphans, the problem is the administrator. Yafuna powers of administrator. Natunda, you know. Administrators have become a devil. I must say, they have become a problem to families. And even just yesterday, one of my colleagues bought a piece of land from an administrator of a certain estate. Now, after some time, the children come out and say, yes, he's our brother, he's our administrator, but when he sold you land, we didn't get a penny. Therefore, if you want to use this land, clear us as well. He thought they were a joke, but whatever I would put on this land, they would pull it down, pull it down. And it is a battle that is going on.
Now, in such in such situations, unfortunately, in our country, people have now abused that whole role of the administrator. You see, even when we go back to the very definition of what administrator is, even in companies, in law firms, any sort of institution, organization, there is definitely an administrator. But the administrator, even when it comes to a school setting, may not necessarily be the owner of the school or the owner of the particular company. You're just there to govern the company to a certain point. So definitely you have limited powers. Unfortunately, it's because most people are not so educated about these particular aspects of the law. But an administrator of an estate is just supposed to govern the estate the same way the deceased would have. Now, unfortunately, most people have abused that role. Administrators take it to the point where they now want to go ahead and start selling the property of the deceased person. And they deny or they neglect the actual beneficiaries of that. Especially if they feel like, okay, I'm administering the estate of my late brother, but what am I benefiting? So most people have that aspect of, I'm doing something and I must get something in return. I'm expecting something. So the whole point is that once you realize that you have what the Bazungu call a rogue administrator, meaning he has gone bad, he has neglected his role, then you can actually go back to Administrator General and move to have this person's letters of administration revoked or made null and void. if you get what I mean. Because if you have proof that the administrator was left with a certain estate of the late, let's say, Mr. Kawalia, and Mr. Kawalia had so many properties, he had bank accounts, he had a piece of land in Kololo or let's say Mutundwe, and now this administrator he goes and takes people to the land in Mutundwe and Kololo and says, no, I'm the owner of this land, I administered, here are my letters. So he brings, like, let's say white people to try and sell that land to them and say, you know what, I'm the actual owner of this house and land. I want to sell this land to you. So once you get to know that there is a transaction, a fraudulent transaction that is about to happen, then you can move to Administrator General's office and explain to them that, you know what, this person is abusing his role as an administrator. So then you can apply to have their letters of administration revoked.
And of course, I hope that's not a very tedious process, because some of them are tricky. If you're 5 brothers, he gets the 3 brothers, they work together, he tells them, you know what, if you're on my side, I do this, I clear you. And unfortunately, you'll find that these may comply. But also now, after getting this certificate and you're the administrator, what is your next step? What should you do next after having these powers? Because the estate is there, fine. Maybe they are collecting rent. Someone maybe was in the transport sector. So am I going to be a lifetime administrator? What next after?
Oh, that's a good question. I will use an example of a recent friend of mine. He's much older than me. He's in his 70s, but he explained to me that they had issues in Masaka. Now, they were trying to govern the estate of their late father. But, by the way, most people may not know this, but even when you're moving to appoint an administrator, you may not necessarily appoint one administrator, especially given the fact that the estate may be so big for one person to govern. So you can appoint 1 or 2 or 3 administrators, so that it does not remain in the